Okay, let's do this. So, for today's reading, as we're going cover to cover, oh, that's weird. Reading the Parinama Method right here. Um, we're at page 255, the seventh hub, and we're in the section on sense of humor. Before I got on, I looked up the other I looked up laughter. It turns out it's laughter in the second hub. And I marked that in case I'm gonna read from it. But one of the things about sense of humor, and when I was writing the book, when I was working on it, one of the things is that, now it kind of looks like everything has its proper place, but there are things that were arising that was like, that like not all the time. Like a lot of times it was like pretty, I'm gonna turn this down a little bit. It was pretty evident about where things belonged and where like they did and didn't belong. But sense of humor was one that felt really elusive in the sense that for a while it was like, where does this live, as a quality in the hub? Because, the even the yeah, no, I won't get into that. But so for sense of humor, it's interesting to juxtapose this now in this way, where sense of humor was the seventh hub, having more to do with like the a lighter, more expansive sensibility about things versus sort of a counter um of like seriousness and like taking things seriously, which is, the thing is, talk about a paradox. It's like you need both. There used to be this thing, I don't know if people still say it, but I remember, now it's been a minute, but this thing that people used to say in companies where they'd say like, we don't take ourselves seriously, but we take our work really seriously, which is a great notion, actually. It's like for like it's the reason it caught on. But yeah, and as we'll get into, and I'm really looking forward to getting to chapter 12, even though it's a little like it's a bit of a ways out. When we're looking at the process of creation, it involves this continued densification of things from being like literally space and making space with inquiry, um, and curiosity and like the wonder and awe and being super receptive and decontextualizing things to create even a larger aperture, and a clearer palette. It's like pushing as much off the palette, so whatever the new painting is like truly a new painting. So it's like, to what extent, do we strip away, is the canvas white, or are we just able to like take off elements, maybe we like strip off the people on it, or maybe we can take a couple trees off it, or is it completely decontextualized? It's like, to what extent can we tolerate this expansiveness? And I'm using tolerate because I have a hard time tolerating it. I don't really. This hub is probably the one that I enjoy spending time in the least. And right now I'm even, before I read this, I started thinking like, I really want to read multiple sections, because I wanted to get through it faster. And I think I've alluded to it in earlier readings, which is like, well, when I was in this phase specifically, for the creation of what would become, the Parinama Method and the book that contains it, that that's really uncomfortable in this. It's uncomfortable. It's really antithetical to like feelings of accomplishment that I find. So I'll talk just specifically, like not as a fact, I'll talk about how I experience this. It's like to be in a space of like active curiosity and reception to new ideas and, like, new notions. It's like, yeah, it's I'm, like, I find it uncomfortable, and I think that's not unusual because once we even get to talking about creation, we'll get more, it'll become evident why creation often starts in lower hubs where things have already been established by other people. And then there's the building on of ideas that other people have had in a very specific way. So, anyway, all right, here, let's get into it. I'm going to read. So, this is the sense of humor section that is here on page 255. And my eyes feel kind of like weirdly tired and dry today for no reason that I can make sense of actually right now. So you may be able to see the humidifier steam rise behind me. So, okay, so sense of humor. So remaining lighthearted and receptive to absurdity opens the gates of heaven in everyday life. There's heavier energy in the first hub, but up here in the seventh hub, there's a sparkly eyed wit, something that's particularly annoying to people with shrinking adaptations in this hub. Yeah. Yeah, I'll point to that. So one of the things, and a spoiler alert to what we get into, which is that like the shrinking adaptation in this hub is to create notions of certainty and to cling to the idea that ideas can be fixed because it is uncomfortable because it's ungrounded. And this points to the constant nature of change that exists even specifically in the physical world, that nothing in the physical world remains the same. And so the sense of being destabilized is one that actually having this, like, stronger first hub notion of sort of this deeper trust can support. But one of the things is not uncommon is that people who have really clung to a shrinking adaptation in this hub will be kind of like, "Why don't you take things more seriously?" Yeah. And one of the things with how interruptions and stressors and abuses happen in this hub is sort of like unseriousness being assigned as like a sort of ethical or moral shortcomings. And personally, in my experiences with it, it has been being lighthearted and highly productive is really dissonant for people with shrinking adaptations in this hub. It's really hard to understand that if you have the balance. See, this is like a little esoteric, so hopefully this isn't too out there, but to be able to have that sort of openness and lightheartedness. So, and like one of the things that's a good example of this is like doing hard work. So if you're out, doing like manual labor, like working in your garden, or you're doing anything, or even just doing any kind of work, and you can add some levity to like really hard work, it creates more sustainability of it. So there's a really practical balance of it. But there's also, even from like an executive standpoint, the fact of being really sort of like buoyant and lighthearted, in terms of receptivity to like like new ways to approach things that are more optimized. People that are very shrunk in this hub will be activated by the presence of that. So yeah. Well, and also also activated by the notion that, like, the presence of lightheartedness is the implication that's easy in this particular way, whereas as I've just sort of pointed to, it's like being able to remain sort of open and lighthearted actively in under pressure is incredibly hard, you know? So, like, the notion that lightheartedness is just this kind of, like, uniform unseriousness, it's like is a misunderstanding of what it is, and someone who's really like, kind of shrunken and, like, really, really bound to the notion of certainty, will find that unsettling. Yeah, and they also won't know it, So it'll be really foreign. Like, so the idea will be like, that can't make any sense because it isn't something that is part of their own direct experience. So there's role for compassion there, or empathy rather. So, okay, an essential distinction exists between being mindful of others and not taking ourselves too seriously. Like the somatic release that crying creates in the fourth hub, the laughter of the second hub accesses and activates the buoyancy of the seventh. The delight and surprise and absurdity also stimulates it. Laughter releases physical tension, stimulates organs, increases oxygen intake, soothes tension, releases immune boosting neuropeptides and endorphins. So the movement of laughter is considered to originate from the second hub, but our sense of humor is movement and joy in concert with the intellect. It's a whole body experience that supports transcendence. When we remain grounded yet lighthearted, we experience a transcendent quality because humor loosens rigidity and helps us access deeper states of joy and understanding. Yes and amen. One thing I will say about this from a really practical example is, I worked in a company and and one of the things I was trying to figure out was how to build part of the business. And and it involved this like really like an activity that is by like a no like known for its drudgery, which was doing like outreach calling. So I elected to do this because I wanted to figure out like how we could figure out messaging, how we could figure out targeting, just how we could get more effective and higher volume. So I was doing it myself, which has actually been kind of a practice I've done in my career a lot, which is figuring out how to sell something and then building a sales organization around that. So, which is also something that requires a lot of lightheartedness. Actually, that's like a whole other topic about the fact that, yeah, okay, I'm not going to go into it. But anyway, like, so I'm just going to use this one example is that, so I was in a room with like a lot of engineers, all engineers actually, all people from, like the top business schools, all, people from, like in this, it was like MIT and Dartmouth and I was still like fairly young, like 15, 16, 17 years younger than I am now. Um, and and the thing is that like I was doing this thing that was like such drudgery and my ability to like maintain long ass hours of it for days on end because it just required repetition and it kept like doing this thing where it's like I don't know if you've ever I'd never done it before at the time I don't think certainly not like outreach calling. It's awful because it's like the thing is you're calling, in like on the surface, it's awful because you're calling people, that don't expect your call, who don't know you, who don't know what you're talking about. And so, I mean, you're a nuisance. Like by definition, it's like you're literally signing up to be a nuisance to people. And you're actively engaging in being a nuisance to somebody's day, you know. Um, and like the thing was with it was that I remember there came this point where like it kind of got it got wind back to me like that the engineers just thought that I was they were like, oh my god, this is so ridiculous. There's this, and also I think I was one of the only women too, and I'd gone to like whatever, um gone to a state school in New Hampshire. Um, yeah. And so there's this whole thing that was like, oh, she's just over there being kind of like, we're all over here working hard and she's over there. It just sounds like she's talking to her friends all day. So I'd be laughing and I'd be being ridiculous. And part of the thing, and this is going back to just the lightheartedness, is that like part of it was like I approached the whole enterprise with that exact notion that I just described, which was like not being in denial about it, like being fully aware of the nuisance hood of the thing I was doing and the absurdity of it. Like how absurd it is to just be a call that lands in the middle of somebody's day where, where you've no way to know what they'll be in the middle of doing or what you're interrupting or what kind of mood they're in. And so there was this delight that I took in the absurdity of it. And it just like, and where I'd laugh with the people, like when they were, I'd agree with them that I was a pain in the ass. I would agree with them that it was, and it was just like, and even the stuff like when they were really mad, I'd like totally got it. I was like, yeah, like totally. And so it was kind of like this thing, and it was funny because people were complaining, about like the engineers are complaining because it felt like unfair to them that there'd be somebody that's working that isn't working because they thought I wasn't working. And then I was there for a relatively short time, and I brought in $16.4 million of deals. So yeah, and which changed everything, changed the whole face of the company. So that thing, and then all this, and then little by little, it was the respect shifted. I didn't give a shit, honestly. I actually didn't like it. Like one of the things that was interesting was that, it's just as a side note, I don't know if this matters for this topic, but it was interesting to me because the binary of that of thinking, that I wasn't, like questioning my intellect or whatever, I wasn't really interested in like, well, I don't know, maybe I was at the time. But what happened is when it shifted fully in the other direction, where now like there was nothing I could do that was considered wrong, where it was like, it was just absurd. I remember people would be asking me to interview engineer candidates and do, and then I built out a large international organization, and the culture I built within the organization sort of shifted the entire company. And then it was like hundreds of millions of dollars and all that kind of stuff. But the thing is with that is that it was like it shifted from this thing where it was like this disdain to then this wholesale thing where there's nothing I could do that was questioned. And it's like, you know, and that was really uncomfortable. That made me really uncomfortable because there's something about knowing your own fallibility, knowing every human being's fallibility, and thinking like, yeah, it's really dangerous to put somebody in a position where you just believe everything that they say has to actually be accurate. And it happens a lot because, as discussed earlier, thinking is exhausting work. It's incredibly energetically demanding. That it takes this like significant chunk of our caloric expenditure to operate our prefrontal cortex, right? And so these shortcuts are, evolutionary, like they're sort of beneficial in terms of the economy of who and what we are, but the danger of them is that, and actually, I certainly figured out how to exploit this in my career, was the understanding that if you make a really strong opening, and you really establish a level of dominance early on, in infallibility, like where you've like very detailed, very key, making no mistakes, that people just kind of, that there's a tendency to just kind of go, okay, I've reconciled her so she can operate without, tremendous oversight, and I mean, I'm not gonna get into it. I'm talking about strategy here and like very practical things about being successful. in the, conventional world. Um, but I'm also pointing to the thing where it's like, it's hard to continue to evaluate something once you feel like you've already made a clear notion on it. And that's very seventh hub. Accidentally stumbled into that, which is the idea that once you know something, instead of the thing that everything's always changing. The nature, the only thing constant is change. So that to feel that something is fully known, but it's understandable why it happens. So I'm going to read before I jump off here, page 92, is the second hub, and it's laughter. It's the counterpoint to the seventh hub. So laughing feels good. An authentic, spontaneously arising laugh shakes our body and delights the senses. It even feels good to see or hear someone else really laugh. Laughter is contagious and can create positive attunement between people. The things we find funny have some universal themes, but what delights you is part of your unique identity. And laughing with someone builds intimacy and connection in personal and professional relationships. Real laughter can't be predicted or controlled, making it an ideal demonstration of the feel hub expression. It incorporates an element of surprise that sparks genuine joy. Of course, there's also laughter that's used to signal social agreement or to reduce an awkward moment. That is not what we're talking about here. In the second hub, laughter and giggling can be an outlet for percolating emotions that are not fully understood. A signal that can be misread as not taking something seriously, a lack of sensitivity, or even falsely attributed to agreement or acceptance of an awkward situation. In the seventh hub, laughter is part of our ability to not take ourselves too seriously, which also helps to release mental rigidity. Full circle. Well done. We did it. We made it. Thank you. Okay. So that is it for me today. Next installment we will have, which will be is Amazing Grace and a Higher Power. I have not read ahead to that, so it'll be interesting to see what that contains. Apparently I know it because I wrote it, but it was, you get, the drill at this point if this isn't your first time watching this. Okay. Wow, the timer just stuck. It's really weird. I'm looking at the timer up here, and it sort of stops and then jumps forward. Okay, anyway, sending you lots of love. Any comments I'll respond to. I really appreciate you. I really appreciate you watching. And I'm incredibly receptive to any thoughts you have, whether it relates to expansion on a topic, disagreement, sharing, some folks share with me their personal experiences. And for those who don't, that relate to these topics, I love hearing those. I just shared some of my own that arose in the thinking about this and the considering of it. So yeah, so it's really I haven't said this in a while, but one of the things I really look forward to with this is when this is more of a discussion. I love hearing from other people. I love hearing and when people say, "Hey, you're kind of missing something here. I think this is an important part of this," or saying "Here's an experience I had with this, and I agree, how this, relates to this." So, that we're practicing together, that your consciousness around this is expanding my own and vice versa. It's a two-way street. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up. Again, thank you. I love you so much for just everything, and I appreciate you, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.